Emily Carter had only planned to close her eyes for a moment. Exhausted from 2 sleepless nights and with her 2-year-old son finally resting against her chest, she drifted off mid-flight, surrounded by quiet luxury she could never afford. When she woke, her head was on the shoulder of a stranger in a $1,000 suit, cold gray eyes staring at her like she'd just come back from the dead. "Emily," he said, voice cracking. "My God, it's you." And before she could pull away, before she could ask how he knew her name, he turned his phone toward her. On the screen was a message with no name, no number, only 10 words. "She's your daughter. She's next to you. 5 million, ton. Emily Carter sat stiffly in her seat, her 2-year-old son Noah cradled against her chest, his tiny body rising and falling with soft, rhythmic breaths. The plane hadn't even taken off yet, and she already felt as if she'd crossed continents just to get here. Her worn backpack rested by her feet, the bottle inside still lukewarm from the last rushed feed in the airport bathroom. She hadn't slept properly in 2 days, not since their bus broke down in Oklahoma, not since she'd traded in the last of her savings for this one-way ticket to Los Angeles. She glanced out the window. Rain slid slowly down the glass like tears. Her nerves buzzed under her skin, half exhaustion, half panic. Emily was only 19 and she was terrified, but she'd promised herself, no matter what, she was going to give her son a better life. She was on her way to an interview for a live-in nanny position. The woman on the phone had sounded kind. Maybe it would work. Maybe this would be the start of something different. The business class seat wasn't hers. A middle-aged airline staffer, noticing her trembling hands at the gate, had leaned down and whispered, "Take this boarding pass instead. You need the rest more than the guy who didn't show up." Emily didn't argue. She hadn't had the energy to feel embarrassed. Now next to her sat a sharply dressed man in his 40s. He was quiet, typing something on his phone. His suit was flawless, the kind of dark, pressed fabric that practically smelled like money. He hadn't said a word, just nodded when she settled in. His face was tired in a different way, clean-shaven and successful, but guarded. Emily barely noticed. All she could think about was keeping Noah calm until takeoff. The flight attendant came by to check seatbelts. Emily mumbled thanks, tightened the strap around her waist, and tucked a blanket around Noah. The lights dimmed. The engines roared. And finally, she let her eyes close. Her head dropped sideways, softly brushing the stranger's shoulder. He stiffened but didn't move. Minutes passed, maybe an hour. The plane leveled out. Emily's breathing deepened. Her hands stayed protectively over Noah's back. The man beside her sat frozen. Then slowly he turned his head, looked at her. Really looked. Her face was pale, framed by tangled dark hair. Her cheeks were hollow, but her features were unmistakable. His hand trembled as he reached for his phone. A message had just come in. No number, no contact name. "She's next to you. Her name is Emily. She's your daughter. You have 48 hours. 5 million, or the truth comes out." His chest tightened. His throat went dry. He looked at the girl again, closer this time. Her face, the line of her nose, the way her eyebrows arched when she stirred in her sleep. A scar on her chin, small but there. He remembered the fall on the kitchen floor when she was 5. It couldn't be. He hadn't seen his daughter in 14 years, and now she was sleeping on his shoulder with a child in her arms. His hands shook as he lowered the phone. She stirred, blinked, looked up into his face with startled, exhausted eyes. She realized where her head had been resting. Sat up abruptly. "I'm sorry," she murmured, adjusting Noah's blanket. "I didn't mean to." The man stared at her. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then softly, with disbelief heavy in every word, "What did you say your name was?" Emily's fingers tightened instinctively around Noah as the man beside her stared at her like she was a ghost. His eyes were glassy, his mouth slightly open. The air between them felt suddenly charged, as though something invisible had shifted. Emily pulled her son closer and adjusted the baby blanket, avoiding his gaze. "I asked what your name was," he said again, quieter this time, but more deliberate. His voice was low and steady, but something trembled beneath it. She hesitated. "Emily. Emily Carter." He swallowed hard. His lips parted as if to speak, but no words came. Instead, he reached slowly into the inside pocket of his suit jacket and pulled out his phone. He opened his photos and held the screen out to her, with an unsteady hand. This was my daughter. She disappeared 14 years ago. Emily blinked, confused. On the screen was a picture of a smiling little girl with a lopsided ponytail and bright eyes. 5 years old, happy. The background was a warm kitchen, sunny through the windows. The little girl looked familiar. More than that, the curve of the cheek, the eyebrows, the chin. It was like looking at a younger version of herself, or Noah. She instinctively looked down at her son. The resemblance was undeniable. "No," she said automatically. "That's not, I'm not," but she faltered. Something deep in her chest twisted. "I got a message an hour ago," the man said, voice hoarse. "Anonymous number. It said you were my daughter, that you were on this flight next to me, and that if I wanted to keep it quiet, I'd need to pay $5 million. He turned the phone again and showed her the text. Her stomach dropped. The letters blurred slightly as she read it. She wanted to scoff, to laugh, to say this was insane. Some rich man confusing her with someone else. Maybe a scam. But her heart pounded. "I was adopted," she said slowly. "At least, that's what I was told. My mom, well, the woman who raised me, she died when I was 15. Cancer. She never talked much about when I was younger. Said it was painful." "What was her name?" he asked. "Maria Lopez." The man inhaled sharply. "That was the name of the woman who used to work for us. A nanny. She vanished the same night my daughter disappeared." Emily's breath caught in her throat. Something icy crawled up her spine. "I don't remember anything," she whispered. "Before I was about 5. It's just flashes, sounds, nothing clear." He leaned back in his seat, blinking rapidly, trying to keep his emotions in check. "My name is Richard Lawrence," he said. "I live in San Diego. I own a chain of clinics. When my daughter was taken, my entire life fell apart. My wife, her mother, couldn't survive it. She took her own life a year later." Emily couldn't respond. She sat frozen, stunned, numb. The child on her lap stirred slightly and she instinctively rocked him. "I'm not asking you to believe me," he said, his voice quieter now. "And I'm not sure I believe it myself, but I'm going to find out the truth. I owe her that. I owe you that." Emily nodded slowly, uncertain, shaken. Everything she knew about her life, everything she believed, suddenly felt like sand slipping through her fingers. She looked back down at the photo, then at her son, then at the man beside her, who might have been a stranger, or might have been something else entirely. Emily didn't sleep that night. After the plane landed, Richard insisted on booking them a hotel suite. 2 rooms, one for him, one for her and Noah. He didn't push, didn't speak much on the ride from the airport, but she could feel the tension in him, the energy of someone trying to stay composed while something inside was unraveling. She agreed only because she had nowhere else to go. Her interview had been postponed at the last minute, and her phone, cracked and unreliable, had started glitching again. Noah was tired, cranky, confused. She just needed a bed, a few hours of silence, and maybe to convince herself this was all some surreal misunderstanding. But now, lying awake in a king-size hotel bed with her son snuggled into her side, Emily kept replaying everything. The photo, the man's face, the text message. That name, Maria Lopez. Her mother. The one who never told her where she'd come from. The one who got furious whenever she asked about her birth parents. The next morning, Richard knocked on her door with quiet hesitation. He held out a paper coffee cup and a file. "I didn't want to wait," he said. "I called a private lab. They can do a rapid DNA test, confidentially. We just need a cheek swab. Yours and Noah's, if you're okay with that. Just to be thorough." Emily took the file without speaking. Her hands were cold. "I'll pay for everything," he added quickly. "You don't owe me anything. If it turns out I'm wrong, if this is a mistake, I'll leave you alone, I promise." She nodded, still dazed. "Okay, I'll do it." The process was quick. A nurse came up to the hotel room, professionally discreet, swabs, signatures, sealed envelopes. She took Noah's sample while he squirmed on Emily's lap. Richard stood by the window, arms crossed, saying nothing. After the nurse left, Emily stayed by the table, absently flipping through old texts on her phone. She didn't know what she was looking for. A memory. a crack, something she'd missed. That evening, the lab called Richard directly. Emily sat across from him on the couch, holding a glass of water with both hands. He didn't put the phone on speaker. He just listened. Then slowly he looked up. "It's confirmed," he said quietly. "Emily, you're my daughter. There's no doubt." Her hands tightened around the glass. She felt the world shift beneath her feet. Quietly, completely. She didn't cry. Not then. She didn't say anything at all. Instead, she got up and went to the bedroom, closed the door behind her, and sank to the floor beside the crib where Noah was napping. She sat there, back against the wall, trying to breathe. Her entire life had just split open. Later, Richard left a folder outside her door. Inside were photos, birth certificate copies, news clippings, flyers with her childhood face on them. Missing, Emily Lawrence. Last seen, San Diego. Age 5. It was all real. It had happened. She'd been the missing child on someone's fridge, the whispered tragedy in someone's past. She thought of Maria, her voice, her hands, the way she used to flinch at loud noises. Emily had always thought she was just damaged, just sad. But what if she was hiding more than just pain? There were no answers. Not yet. Just questions stacked on questions. And one unbearable truth that settled into Emily's chest like a heavy stone. She'd never truly known who she was. And now, she wasn't sure she wanted to find out. Emily didn't speak to Richard the next day. She took Noah for a walk instead, pushing his stroller down a quiet side street near the hotel. Her thoughts tangled with every step. She watched her son's small face in the reflection of the shop windows, his cheeks full and warm with life, and wondered what she'd passed on to him. Not just genetics, but the silence, the mystery, the loss. Richard had left her space just like he'd promised. He didn't knock, didn't call, but she knew he was waiting, probably pacing that hotel suite, trying not to drown in hope or guilt. She didn't know what to feel herself. Anger, maybe. But at who? Him? Maria? The universe? By the time she returned, a manila envelope was waiting at her door. She hesitated before opening it. Inside was a single page, a report from the private investigator Richard had hired. At the top, subject Maria Lopez. Emily read every word, her stomach clenching with each line. Maria had worked for the Lawrences from 2006 to 2008. Full-time nanny, no criminal history, good references. Then on a warm spring day in May, Emily, 5 years old, disappeared from the backyard. Maria disappeared the same night. Her car abandoned. Phone shut off. Police suspected kidnapping. Richard and his wife were investigated briefly, but no charges were filed. The case went cold, until now. The report listed an address in Albuquerque, a charity-run nursing home. Maria had been admitted under a false name, Ana Cortez, but fingerprints matched. Early onset dementia, late-stage liver disease, barely coherent most days. The staff thought she was just a lost woman with no past. But a week ago, she'd mentioned a child, a girl named Emily. Richard had already arranged a visit. He hadn't forced it on her. The final line of his note, handwritten under the report, said only, "You don't have to go, but I think she may be the only one who can tell you why." Emily stared at the words for a long time. That night, after Noah was asleep, she sat across from Richard at the small kitchen table in the suite. They hadn't spoken since the DNA results. She poured herself a glass of water but didn't drink it. "Tell me about her," she said finally. "Tell me about Maria." Richard looked tired, older than the day before. "She was quiet, reliable, kind. Your mother trusted her completely. So did I. We thought of her like family." He paused. "But after you disappeared, and she vanished too, I thought she'd taken you. I thought she betrayed us." Emily frowned. "What about the police?" "They tried," he said, "but there were no leads. Maria had no family, no social media. She was a ghost after she left. I looked for her for years, private investigators, money, even people who operated outside the system. Nothing. Eventually," his voice broke for the first time, "eventually I had to live with the idea that you might be dead." Emily's stomach turned. "And now you think she just raised me?" "I don't know what to think," he said honestly. "But if she's alive, and if she did take you, I need to hear why. And I think you do too. Emily didn't answer. But the next morning, before the sun had fully risen, she packed a small overnight bag, bundled Noah into his car seat, and told Richard she was ready. They drove in silence for hours, past the city, through endless open desert. The horizon stretched like something ancient and watching. Emily stared at the road, her fingers white-knuckled in her lap. She didn't know what she wanted to find. Forgiveness, closure, or maybe just the truth, no matter how ugly it was. When they finally pulled into the care facility, the sky was a pale blue, cloudless and cold. Maria was waiting inside, smaller than Emily remembered, thinner. Her hair was gray, her hands trembling in her lap. But her eyes, those dark, frightened eyes. They locked on Emily the moment she stepped through the door. Maria whispered something. Her voice cracked. Emily stepped forward. What did you say? She asked. Maria looked up, and in a voice frail but certain, she repeated the words. I saved you. Emily sat across from Maria in the small sunlit room that smelled faintly of disinfectant and lavender. Maria's hands shook as she reached slowly for Emily's fingers, her skin paper-thin and cool to the touch. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was heavy, electric, decades thick. Maria's eyes welled with tears as she looked at Emily's face, studying every feature like a forgotten prayer come to life. You were so little, she whispered, so scared. You cried every night for your mother. Not me, your real mother. I could never replace her. Emily didn't answer. She couldn't. Her throat had gone tight, her body tense. Noah sat beside her on the floor with his toy truck, oblivious, safe. She envied him that. I didn't take you to hurt anyone, Maria said. I didn't plan it. I panicked. That night, there was a fight. Your father and mother. It was bad, loud. I heard things I wasn't supposed to hear. Your mother was saying she would take you and leave, that she was going to ruin him, that she had evidence. And then the screaming stopped. Maria paused. Her lips trembled. I went inside and she was on the floor, unconscious, bleeding. Richard was gone. You were hiding under the table. I don't know if he hurt her. I don't know what happened. But I grabbed you. I ran. Emily's breath caught. I took you because I thought, if she died, and if he was guilty, you'd be in danger. And if he wasn't, then maybe you'd still be safer with me. I don't know. I was 22 and terrified. I didn't even take my ID. I just drove. Emily leaned back, stunned. She couldn't process the picture Maria was painting. Not yet. Her father had told her a different story. A wife lost to grief. A family shattered by loss. Not this. Not accusations and blood and running in the dark. You could have gone to the police, Emily said, voice hoarse. I know, Maria said, but I had no proof, and I was undocumented. I thought no one would believe me. And then it got harder to go back. I used fake names. We moved every year or two. I kept you small. I lied about everything, and you were happy, sometimes. No, Emily said quietly. I wasn't. Maria closed her eyes. I know. I see it now. I failed you, trying to save you. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I made a prison for both of us. Outside the room, Richard stood behind the glass, watching. The staff wouldn't allow him in yet. Maria didn't know he was there. Emily hadn't decided whether to tell her. When the conversation ended, Maria sank into her chair, exhausted. Emily stood slowly, her knees weak. She looked at the woman who had fed her, bathed her, read her stories, and lied to her every day. I don't forgive you, Emily said. Not now. Maybe not ever. But I don't hate you. Maria nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. That's more than I deserve. Emily left the room. In the hallway, Richard stepped forward, but Emily held up a hand. Not yet, she said. That night, back at the hotel, Emily sat alone on the balcony, Noah asleep behind her. The city lights shimmered, silent and unaware. Her phone buzzed, a text. Unknown number. You found her. Good. Now pay up or lose everything. 48 hours, $5 million, or I go public. Emily stared at the screen, her chest hollowing out. It hadn't ended. Someone out there still held the truth like a loaded weapon. and now they were aiming it at the people she just started to let into her life. She looked down at Noah through the sliding door. His face was peaceful, calm, and she knew she had to protect him, no matter what, even if it meant uncovering the rest of the truth. Starting with who was behind the threat, Emily didn't tell Richard about the message right away. She needed time to think. She needed to be sure. She couldn't afford to make any more decisions from fear. So instead, she watched him. They returned to Los Angeles the next morning. Richard tried to talk to her on the flight, to ask about Maria, but she gave short answers. Something inside her had shifted again. Something deeper than suspicion. She had seen Maria's fear, her guilt, and she had seen a different version of her father in that room. A man viewed through someone else's terror. Now she needed to find out which version was true. Back at the hotel, she waited until Noah was asleep, then sat across from Richard at the dining table. She laid her phone down between them and turned the screen toward him. The threatening message still glowed faintly in the dark room. His face paled. "I got this last night," Emily said quietly. "They knew we went to see her. They know everything. You said you didn't tell anyone." "I didn't," Richard said, his hands curled into fists on the table. "Only my lawyer and the PI, that's it." "You think someone close to you is doing this?" she asked. "I don't know, but it's not random. This is personal." Emily nodded slowly. "I want to meet them. Whoever's behind this." Richard stood abruptly. "Absolutely not." "It's not a request," she said. "They want money. They're threatening me, Noah, our safety. I'm not just going to wait for them to decide it's time to act." Richard hesitated. He paced the room for a long time, running his fingers through his hair. Eventually, he stopped by the window and spoke without turning around. "I have an idea who it might be." Emily's heart skipped. "Who?" He turned, his expression hard. "My brother." That name again. David. "He used to be my business partner," Richard said, "until he got caught funneling funds. I forced him out, quietly to avoid scandal. He always thought the company should have been his, even though he never built a thing. After you were taken, he was the one who told me to give up. Said I was ruining everything by chasing ghosts. He called you a sunk cost." Emily felt cold. "I cut ties with him 5 years ago. We haven't spoken since. But he always knew how to manipulate people. He knew our security habits, the family history. If anyone could fake this kind of intel, it's him." Emily leaned forward. "Then let's catch him." She and Richard contacted a private cyber investigator. They traced the number, masked through multiple layers, but there were mistakes. A slip in the routing, a burner phone purchased in San Diego, security footage from the store. The image wasn't perfect, but it was enough. It was David. They set the trap within 24 hours. Emily would go to the meeting, wired with undercover officers nearby. Richard would prepare a suitcase that looked like a money handoff. David wouldn't suspect her. He hadn't seen her in over a decade. The meeting was arranged at a rooftop parking lot downtown. Sunset. Exposed. Quiet. Just risky enough to look real. Emily stood near the edge of the lot, the fake suitcase by her feet. Her hands were steady, though her heart raced. Richard was in a surveillance van nearby. Police waited in unmarked cars. A light breeze played with her hair. David arrived late. He stepped out of a black car wearing sunglasses and a smile like he already owned the outcome. "You look just like your mother," he said casually. Emily said nothing. "You bring the money?" She nudged the suitcase with her foot. "It's all there. But I want to know why." He smirked. "Why?" "Because your father ruined everything. He built a kingdom and then destroyed it over you. A little girl. A mistake." "You knew where I was," Emily said. "All those years." "You could have told him." He laughed. "Why would I do that? You were leverage, and I knew he'd keep bleeding over you forever." That was all they needed. The police moved in. David tried to run, but they had him boxed in. He went down fast, yelling, spitting, threatening lawsuits. But it was over. Emily stood there watching it unfold, feeling nothing. Not relief, not vengeance. Just silence. Like something old had finally collapsed. Later that night, Richard sat beside her in the hotel, a glass of water in his hand, his tie loosened. "You were brave, Anthony," he said. Emily shook her head. "No, I was tired. Tired of people deciding who I am, what I'm worth. He looked at her, really looked at her, and said, "You're not just my daughter. You're stronger than both of us." For the first time in days, Emily felt something loosen in her chest. Not peace, but the beginning of it. The trial moved faster than expected. David was denied bail due to the extortion charges, and the evidence gathered from the sting operation, audio recordings, the traced messages, the security footage, left no room for doubt. He was facing years in federal prison. But for Emily, the legal outcome wasn't what consumed her thoughts. It was everything that came after. She had been so focused on surviving the storm that she hadn't stopped to consider what would happen once it passed. She was still living at the hotel, Noah's toys now scattered across the expensive carpet like pieces of a different life that didn't quite fit the room. Richard visited daily. He brought groceries, offered help with laundry, read to Noah with surprising gentleness. They were learning each other carefully, like people trying to walk barefoot across broken glass. Emily hadn't called him Dad, not once. One afternoon, a week after David's arrest, Richard asked her to come with him to a house. He didn't say much, just that it was outside the city, that he wanted her to see something. They drove in silence. The road curved into quiet hills lined with eucalyptus trees. After 30 minutes, they pulled into a gravel driveway. The house was modest by his standards. A single-story light stone exterior, shaded porch, and a small garden overgrown with lavender and weeds. But it breathed peace. "This was your mother's place," Richard said. "Before we married, she loved it. We kept it, but no one's lived here in years. I thought maybe if you ever wanted something that didn't feel like a hotel room or a stranger's mansion." Emily stepped out of the car slowly. The air smelled like dry grass and old soil. She walked up the porch, trailing her fingers along the wood rail. Inside it was dusty, but the bones of the place were strong. Wide windows, creaking floors, sunlight that didn't feel artificial. Noah ran through the hallway with a squeal, chasing the echo of his own footsteps. Richard stood in the doorway, watching her with unreadable eyes. "I didn't come here to win you back," he said. "I can't undo what happened. I can't fix what I didn't know, but I can try to build what's left." Emily looked around. Her heart beat strangely, full and aching at once. She'd never had a home that felt like hers. Only rooms she passed through, places she had to survive. "What happens if I say yes?" she asked quietly. "Then it's yours, no strings. You live here, or sell it, or burn it down. I just want you to have something of hers, something of yours." Later that night, she stood in the middle of the empty living room with Noah asleep against her shoulder. The moonlight cut long shadows across the floor, and for the first time in years, Emily felt safe. Not completely, not forever, but enough. She walked outside to the porch where Richard was sitting, his jacket off, sleeves rolled up, hands folded in his lap like he didn't know what to do with them. She sat beside him. Neither of them spoke for a long while. Then Emily said softly, "I don't know if I'll ever be ready to call you Dad." He nodded. "I don't need you to. You're here. That's enough." She looked out at the night sky. It wasn't just dark. It was full, quiet and heavy with stars. And for the first time in a long time, she felt the future stretch before her, not as a threat, but as a question she could finally choose to answer. 6 months later, the house didn't feel like someone else's past anymore. It felt like home. The garden had been cleared out, the lavender trimmed, the weeds pulled. Emily planted tomatoes along the fence line and let Noah stomp barefoot through the soft dirt. The inside had changed too. The walls were painted a warm cream, furniture chosen not for style but for comfort, shelves slowly filling with books and framed photos. New memories, not borrowed ones. Emily had started taking online courses in child development. At first, it was just something to do between changing diapers and folding laundry. But the more she studied, the more it made sense. She understood children, not just because she was a mother, but because she had once been one who was lost and scared. She wanted to help others like her. Girls who didn't know where they came from. Boys who carried silence like armor. So she enrolled full-time. Richard came by often. He never stayed too long, never pushed too hard. He helped build a playset in the backyard. He brought groceries even when she told him she didn't need them. And every Sunday, he and Noah sat in the living room and read books together. The little boy curled up on his lap like it was the most natural thing in the world. Emily still hadn't called him Dad. But once after Noah scraped his knee and Richard picked him up before she could, whispering soft words of comfort, she didn't correct him when he said, "Let's go find Grandpa's special Band-Aids." In late spring, Emily launched the first local meeting of a support group she created for girls who had aged out of the foster system. The group met at a community center downtown, a small circle of folding chairs and plastic cups of tea. On the first day, only 3 girls showed up. One of them barely spoke. Another cried halfway through and left. But one stayed behind after the others had gone. She looked at Emily with hollow eyes and asked, "How did you stop feeling like nothing?" Emily didn't answer right away. She thought of Maria, who had died 2 months earlier in the care facility. She thought of Richard, standing outside the funeral with tears on his face and forgiveness in his silence. She thought of Noah, asleep that night with his hand curled around her finger. "I didn't," Emily said. "I just started acting like I was something, and eventually it didn't feel like a lie anymore." The girl nodded. By summer, the support group had doubled. A local nonprofit reached out. Someone from the city came to one of the meetings. There was talk of funding, of expanding the program. Emily felt overwhelmed, but not afraid. For once, she wasn't just surviving, she was building. On Noah's 3rd birthday, the backyard was full of balloons and mismatched chairs. Richard arrived with a box of wooden blocks and a hand-drawn card. He looked awkward in the paper birthday hat someone had forced on him, but when Noah pulled him toward the cake, he didn't take it off. Later, after the guests had left and the candles had burned low, Emily stood at the sink, washing dishes while Richard dried. The kitchen was warm with the smell of frosting and laughter. She looked at him. He looked back. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For showing up. For staying." He smiled, tired but sincere. "You didn't make it easy." "I wasn't supposed to," she said, then paused. "Dad." He froze. The plate in his hand stilled mid-motion. Then slowly he set it down. It was just one word, but it was everything. That night, as Emily tucked Noah into bed, he looked up at her and asked, "Are we happy now?" She kissed his forehead. "Yes," she whispered, "we are." And she meant it. This story, at its core, isn't about blackmail or even about a missing child. It's about the quiet, brutal weight of the past and how we choose to carry it. Emily represents vulnerability transformed into strength. She didn't just survive her trauma. She faced it, questioned it, and reclaimed her identity on her own terms. She chose not to be a victim of circumstance or a passive piece in someone else's tragedy, but a person with agency, with flaws, and with purpose. Not perfect, but whole. Richard's arc is just as human. A man shattered by guilt, softened by grief, and slowly rebuilt through humility and presence. He doesn't get redemption by force. He earns trust the only way it can be earned, patiently and without expectation. The ending isn't loud. It's not about dramatic justice or revenge. It's quiet, real. A woman who's been lost all her life finally finds her place, not in someone else's world, but in one she chose to build for herself. That, to me, is what makes this ending powerful. Not that everything is fixed, but that healing, even when messy, is possible.